state of Michigan doing this demo, so even though it's up north, you know, by 7 hours from where I'm at, a lot of the season is the same. A lot of the what we experience is the same out on the line. And so I like to go over my trap line from the start of season to the end of season, and throughout there it can help resonate different things with people, right? And in their environments that are a little bit different. So even though I may have this much ice and you got this much ice, you know what I mean? We're still under ice trapping, right? So anyway, we'll get to that. So in my pack basket, which I generally don't use a pack basket unless I'm on foot and I'm going up a stream or up there or something along those lines, maybe around a farm pond, something like that, I'll use a pack basket. But in my basket, I'm carrying 2 different traps. That's it. I'm carrying a foothold, which for me is the Bridger 1.5 coil spring. That's what I use. I extend my chain. I put 30 inches of chain on there. And we'll go over the reasons why I do that. And then at the end is our Hags bracket that we had invented. And the whole concept for me is I want to reach into my trap basket. I want to grab my trap and have everything I need already on, right? So when I'm walking up those streams or creeks, whatever you want to call them, by doing this, I've got a stabilizer on here that I can now stabilize my trap at any height of that water column, right? So for me, it was simple, right? And our concept is simple. There's no screws, there's no nuts and bolts, there's no wing nuts to tighten, nothing that's going to rust or fall or break or anything like that. It's just a simple concept. When I was in the Marine Corps, we had a very simple motto, and that was keep it simple, stupid, right? And so we used the same philosophy when we were designing our products, that there's nothing mechanical on this at all that's going to break, right? And so as a trapper, that's what I wanted out of the trap. Grab my trap and go. So that's the one trap I use. The other trap that I use, and I'm switching over to these more and more every year. This is an RBG. This is a 6-inch RBG, or also known as a 160 single spring. RBGs are made by Nick Ernie. He's out of Indiana. These are not the RBGs of 10 years ago. These are the new age RBGs, right? Nick Ernie bought that company and he's transformed it into a really great product. Great trigger system, great dog, great springs. The whole trap is really different, and it's a very high quality trap. And this is the trap, again, that I'm converting over to for my body grip traps. I used to use more your traditional square counterbear trap or body grip trap. Again, I'm switching over to more of the rounds. And you'll pick up on some of the reasons why as we get going forward, but that's it. Those are the 2 things that I use, right? And when I'm using these fiberglass rods as part of my system, now I can cover with a body grip at the very bottom of the water column to the very top with a foothold if I'm doing top edge steps, so on and so forth, right? A lot of people thought when we first come out with that Hags bracket that it was for baited sets, right? And that was the only purpose around it. And the reason for that was some of our marketing that we were doing at the time. We were kind of focused on baited sets at the time when we were pushing it, because that's what we were using at the time, because it was in the spring season, right? It's far from just a baited set system, right? In fact, the baited set piece of it is the smallest portion of it. So we'll go over when and why we use that. So anyways, those are the 2 traps that I use for all of my muskrat trapping, whether it's open water, whether it's under ice, you name it. That just gives you an idea of what we're using, okay? Now, like I said, we would start out during my season down in southern Michigan, and what we're using, it's obviously a little bit difficult to do a whole lot of water stuff here in this dirt mountain, but we'll have to use some imagination, right? essentially got 4 days to get out there and smash as many rats as we can, right? Now this is strictly fur trap, and this isn't ADC trap or anything like that, so obviously a different subject altogether. But for fur trap, I get 4 days before that orange army comes in, and I got to pull, or unless I'm just on strictly private ground, and it's okay to be on there. But for the most part, I'm looking at 4 days. So what have I done to get ready for that, right? So I generally will scout out the bodies of water, whether it's using kayak in that body of water, whether it's boots and I'm walking around that body of water, I'm using a drone. I started using a drone a few years ago to help get a count of the huts that may be on a particular body of water, right? And again, in this early season, I want to focus on hut tracking. That's where I'm at, right? I want to focus on that hut tracking. November 10th, it's a rare occurrence that we're iced out to where we can't get on. There's sometimes where there's some ski on, but for the most part, we can get on. And for me, the huts are, I mean, that's the calling card, right? Go to where the huts are and smash them as quick as you can, right? So when I'm looking at that body of water in that early season, trying to figure out how many traps to load in your kayak, or how many traps to load in your pack, or whatever. So my method is I look at that hut and that gets 4 traps. Not necessarily on that hut, but I target every hut. And I'm not talking about the push-ups, and I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about strictly a hut, a lodge. I'm going to target 4 traps, right? Target that with 4 traps. And the reason I do that is because I want to set an even numbers, right? Now this is if you're setting, let's say, 100 or more traps, right? Or maybe even 50 or more. If I'm only going to go out and set 10 traps, this changes a bit, right? But if I'm going to go set 100 traps, I can't remember where all those 100 traps are. I just can't. And I'm not going to take the time to mark every set on the GPS. And I'm not going to flag every single one either, right? But what I will do is I'll flag that area, or I'll flag, or maybe even mark, depending on where I'm at. I may even mark it on the GPS, that area. So now if I know that I set a trap in that area, I know I set 4, right? I didn't have to flag 4, I didn't have to mark 4, I might have marked 1, right? So that's kind of my method. There's times where you only need 3 traps there. I'll force that 4th, right? I'll put that 4th out there. That's my Hail Mary trap, right? But again, that's my method of my madness, is I try and keep everything even numbers. Just like I do when I'm K9 trapping, I always set in 2s, right? Same thing for muskrat trapping. It's just a method to help me remember. That's why, right? But those 4 traps to me, in that early season, there's the first 2 traps are 100% dead rats. They're my guineas. So because we don't have a hut here, I'm going to make a hut. So let's pretend this pack basket is a hut. As you seen that pack basket wanted to fall over, okay? How many times have you done that out on the line and all your crap falls out of it? Another reason why we want to always attach to your scrap. But the second, maybe the real good thing a pack basket's used for is to pretend it's a hut. All right, so on a hut, you will always have at least one area where those rats are coming on and off of that hut. In the state of Michigan, you cannot technically molest a hut. I don't know really what that means, other than it sounds disgusting. And I don't want to disturb it because, again, I don't know the true definition of molesting a hut, right? But what I believe it means is I can't go on that hut at all and move vegetation, right? I cannot disturb the vegetation on that hut. That's me being extremely Now I said I'm going to bring 4 traps to that hut, but the hut itself is at minimum getting 2, right? So again, we know there's a crawl out, crawl off area, right? And if we can imagine, if you can see, on the side of a hut, there's generally an area where they're pushing on and off, right? So if that gradually goes down under the water, I'm going to set my trap right in that run. I'll stake it off to the side. What I'm doing, there's 2 things that I'm doing. I'm targeting the runway. That's a gimme set, right? It's a gimme set, right? Especially if they're working that hut. The next thing I'm doing is I'm trying to keep that rat away from the hut and destroying the hut, right? So I'm trying to get it out away from the hut a little bit. Generally, they tangle up in the cattails or the vegetation that's out here and they expire. So the one thing to note with the bracket is when you get a floater out there, right? Or what I call a floater, it's a big rat, right? It's one that doesn't want to go down by the weight of the trap. What happens is with this bracket, if you see how we raise it up and down, right, with one hand, all that is, it's like a fulcrum effect, right? So as soon as that bracket goes 90 degrees to the rod, or I should say the hole is 90 degrees to the rod, it'll free slide, right? So what happens is if you get a swimmer out there, it's a vertical ground, right? So it'll help pull that rat down and ground it, right? If you got a swimmer, right? And all we need to do is get his nose under the water. We don't have to take him to the bottom, right? So it does work really good in that perspective. But anyway, like I said, so there's my first set is on that run, okay? Now for an example, if that run or that area that is pushing on and off that hut, crawl out, whatever you want to call it, if that's too deep right there, or it's too steep coming off of that hut, and you don't want to break the law by pushing some vegetation down, what you can do is you can put your rod there. You can lower your trap right off of that run, and we just did the same thing. We just suspended that. That to me is a top edge step, right? So we put that trap on the top edge of the water, just under it, right? About an inch or 2 underneath that water surface, right? So we killed the rat just the same. We didn't mess with the hut itself. So again, it depends on your laws or your interpretation. So that is that. So that's set number 1, and that's a gimme set right there, right? Again, I didn't use bait at that set. Didn't need it. The next set that I'm going to use is depending on the hut makeup itself. If there's another runway, I'm gonna fill it, right? So that's set number 2. But if there's not, again, every hut's getting 2 traps, minimum, right? So if there's not that runway, what I'm going to do is essentially this same thing right here, but I'm going to go to the steep side of the hut. Generally, there's a steep side on it, right? And it's a general, right? They generally will push up all from one side, work that hut, work that hut, work that hut, and it's a cliff on one side. Okay, right? Let's pretend that cliff edge, if you will, is on this back side, right? All I'm going to do is I'm going to take this setup, I'm going to put it on that side of the hut, I'm going to turn it to where my levers touch the hut, and I'm going to take 2 things. I'm going to take a ball of mud, we're in the mud, reach down, grab some, smash it on the hut, reach in, that's big pile, we're not going to use big pile. There's our muskrat lure. We're going to take a little bit of muskrat lure. About yay much. We're going to put it where where we smash that dirt up. That's it. That is absolutely it. There's two things that are going to happen, or two possible things that happen. Muskrats in that early season are out there building that hut, right? They're getting their vegetation together. Not only are they, enforcing their huts, they're also working on their food sources and so on and so forth. But what we're doing here is this is a territorial response, right? They're a rat, they still get territorial, right? So you throw that in there, they're going to investigate what's messing with their hut, right? That fresh mud, they're going to investigate that. The lure is going to help draw that extra inch. I can't tell you for a fact that catches more than the offset in the run, but gosh darn, that catches a ton. I've never done, the homework. Never been good at the homework. Never done the homework to keep track of all the catches, but that set just flat out rocks. I mean, that's a set. Have it in your bag. That's an awesome set. The third set, so has anybody never trapped muskrats before? And it's okay if you haven't, and that's great. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? You've never tried? Okay. So obviously when we see a hut, we know that's muskrat, right? But what if there's no hut, right? Or what if we've already put these two traps out there? Now what do we look for, right? And when you're first starting out, you have no idea what you're looking for. You don't know. There's nobody here that knew it before they started. Period. Right? You have to learn it. And so, of course, I don't see any like grass or anything, but we'll pretend. So over in the cattail area, over in the cattail area, generally, you'll be able to find, now we talk about in a body of water where there's huts, right? Which is generally a pond, a lake, a bay. Like if we're trapping up to Jeff's place, you're out in a huge bay out in Lake Huron, you know what I mean? So it is fair. But what you're going to be looking for is where there's some structure, where there's some vegetation, such as cattails. You're going to look for areas where there's crumbs, okay? So you'll see little crumbs floating around. And the brighter white or the brighter green they are, the fresher it is, right? What happens is they come back to that spot all the time, daily, throughout the day. That's where they're feeding, right? You've seen their breadcrumbs. My wife, she gets mad at me for leaving breadcrumbs all over my shirt. Well, muskrats do the same thing. They leave their crumbs all over there. But anyway, so they eat these crumbs, and those crumbs, if you will, they end up creating a pad, right? And we call that feed pad, right? We're a feed pad. And so what you generally end up doing, before this awesome Hags product was invented, what you would generally do is you would put your trap on that vegetation, on that feed pad, right? It would sit just below the water surface. But generally, by the time you got to here, to go to the next step, it was sunk, right? Early season, they're still making these things, right? So what you would do is you come back, you have to gather vegetation, pile it up to get it pointed enough to come over your back, right? You can still do that. That still works today. But the other thing you can do is if we go back to the top edge set, we can sink our trap right in that feed pad, right? We're right in the feed pad. We don't need to add anything additional there. We can throw a lure there, we can throw some bait there if you want to, but I don't think it's necessary in that early season, right? They're coming back there. They're hungry, they're feeding. That's it. That's my third set, off of that one hut, right? Now the fourth set, let's say you throw in a Hail Mary. My Hail Mary is that beta set in the fall time. Not in the springtime, but in the fall time. So what I'm going to do with a beta set is, so let's pretend that one was a few yards set. So with a beta set, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to use a bait holder, right? And I'm going to take something for bait, right? I like to use carrots or parsnips. I like to use big carrots. I like to use big slices of parsnips. A lot of people like to use baby carrots. Do baby carrots work? Yes, right? After I did a demo in PA, all of a sudden someone started posting stuff online about, look, I see baby carrots work. Yes, you're right, they do work. But there's things that work better, right? If you're in South Dakota and you're using baby carrots and you're catching rats, keep using them. You got more rats than other parts of the world, right? But if you're in Michigan and it may take a night or two, stay away from the baby carrots. They rot up too fast, is my point, right? If it's cold and it's freezing, it doesn't matter, right? If that baby carrot freezes, who cares? But when you're traveling where it's maybe a little bit warmer, a little bit more humid, whatever, you don't want your bait rotting. You want it to stay as fresh as possible. So in the state of Michigan, in most areas, you can no longer bait deer, but all the gas stations, they still sell, a 20-pound bag of carrots. Those are great muskrat bait, right? So if you don't have anything with it, you can also grab some cattail root or something like that, which is what they're feeding on anyway. So obviously it's a preference. It just takes longer and it's not as convenient for you to get. So if we pretend the trap is just below the water surface, the bait anywhere between 9 and 12 inches above the water is critical. The other thing that is critical is behavior structure. So this is a philosophy, but it's not fact. It's not proven fact. Because nobody here has ever talked to a dead rat before. So no one knows the real answer. But a muskrat is not going, if I was to put this out here in the water, in the open water, versus near this structure, right? And I think this holds true for floats. A lot of people that have trouble with floats, I think the story or the philosophy is the same. You're asking that muskrat to stop swimming, climb up on something, and expose yourself to all the owls and hawks and everything else, right? The only place he can get away from you at is underwater, which, what is it, that deep angle? He's getting picked off. But if we have that near structure, whether that's an ice shelf, a brushy overhang, a grassy overhang, cattails, whatever, it gives that muskrat somewhere to go. So when you do start using baiting sets, use them near structure, right? And this is important in the springtime, right? In the springtime, we really start using baiting sets, right? We use bait in the springtime. Out of these 4 sets, I only put bait on this one, so 25%. In reality, I think I'm probably even less than that in the fall. But in the springtime, I'm setting these exact same sets, but all of them get bait. Every single one of them get bait. Okay? And the reason behind that is we've just gone through winter, right? We've been iced up, everything's dead, vegetation's brown, it's rotted, there's nothing fresh for that muskrat to eat. Well, we put something fresh in front of him, he's going to at least investigate it. So, quick story, where we used to live, I dug a pond, I had a pond dug for the sole purpose of trying to get muskrat habitat. And I dug that pond, real shallow on one end, deeper on the other end, again, for muskrat, for waterfowl. But it took about 2 years, and I seen our first rat in there. And then it really came on. You know, all the homes around and everybody else, you know, these are the devil. Cattails are a devil in the pond, right? They want them all gone because they want their ponds to look pretty. I was taking them out, planting them everywhere, right? I was planting them all around our farm. And we got all of this cattail habitat in there, and then we started getting muskrats and so on and so forth. And I sat there and watched them. And I've got hours upon hours upon hours of footage in the water, different situations in that pond, and a few other ponds. But in the early season, so even starting in the summertime, I would get muskrats that would swim by that baited set. They would never even stop to look at it. I mean, they would literally brush that rod and never stop. They keep on going. And I'd go out there every 2-3 days and replace that bait with something else. A radish, a little styrofoam piece of popcorn, you know what I mean? You name it, a piece of orange duct tape, whatever. I was using all kinds of different things to try and learn it. And they would just cruise on by. And then about 30 minutes later, 20-30 minutes later, they'd come back this way. And they had their mouth full of, could be a small sapling, could be the beans. We had a bean field next door at that time. Grasses, a lot of roots. They come back full, with vegetation that they've been programmed to eat. So we're sitting there trying to tell them to eat this, and they're programmed for something else, right? So it taught me a lot, and then throughout the season, I continued to do it. And then in the fall time, that just changed dramatically, right? So in the fall time, almost everyone that came by would stop and eat that carrot. I have to believe it's because there wasn't any other vegetation out there that was fresh, right? So that fresh vegetation did it, right? Again, theory, not necessarily fact, but about as good as I got. So anyway, so those are 2 sets when those are our 4 sets when we're in the pond, or in a hut situation. When we start getting into creeks and rivers and stuff like that, a lot of this starts changing, right? We don't have a hut to work with generally. Right? But this is where we start picking up a lot of it, is in those creeks and stuff, because they're loaded with mink generally, a lot of raccoon, and they're just fun, especially to take the kids out. The little streams and creeks are the best. But anyway, so what I do with those, the concepts are the same, the sets are the same, whereas you got a top edge set. It's where are we putting it, right? And what are we looking for? So when I'm walking, let's just say I'm in the creek, right? And the creek's flowing this way, and I got a creek bank over here, and this is the creek bank. What I'm looking for is, in our area, it's very grassy. Very, very grassy. So a lot of it's agriculture ground. And what I'm looking for is a bare spot. And that bare spot, can generally be about that big to massive, right? And in that bare spot, you'll see what looks like a bunch of little white worms sticking up. Those are just roots, right? Little roots from the grasses and so on and so forth. And generally, if it's actually the right spot, you'll see it may be very faint, or it may be very predominant, a run, right? Where the muskrats, they're working this stream, this creek, and they're coming here because they found the roots that they wanted to eat. And then they're swimming back behind my camera, right? With a mouth. But this is what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for this, okay? Now granted, if you see a rock or a log or whatever that's got scat on it, you're looking for that too. But this is what I'm looking for, right? And I'm simply going to be walking that creek with my backpack with a foothold and body grips. And I'm using the same exact system, again, for open water as I am for in the creeks. And I'm simply going to, just like on the hut, I'm just going to lower it into that run. Make sure you get your rod in the ground deep, right? What will happen is, if you don't catch a rat, you're very prone to catch a raccoon, right? If you catch a raccoon in this set, and you got it in there, you got it in good, it's going to stay right there, right? I've got lots of video, you can check our YouTube page or wherever, and there's raccoons fastened to these rocks. If he does happen to pull a rod because it's that close to maybe it's a root or a was able to get leverage and help pull his way out of the set. If he does pull, what generally happens, so you stuck it in the ground that far, whatever. You stuck it in the ground that far, he pulled it. What happens is that raccoon pulled it, and I was up on the shoulder, and he gets tangled, right? It ends up acting as a drag. I'm not going to advertise it as a drag because you know Murphy. But the fact is it acts like a drag. I've lost 1 in 12 years. And that was because it was real gravelly, rocky, and it was almost like this. I couldn't get it in, right? But it was the spot I had to set, and I could only get the bracket on about that far. And I think there just was just enough play there that over the night or whatever, he was able to get the lock off the rod. So some people will take tape and they'll tape the bottom of the rod, or they'll take a little drop of epoxy or something like that because they're fearful of that. In over 12 years, I've never done that to mine, but by all means, that makes you see the kind of for it, right? So that's one set, and that's the predominant set I like to use when I'm walking these rivers and streams. I'm not out there making a bunch of baited sets and stuff like that, again, until the springtime. But that's what I'm looking for. They're feeding, right? They're gathering their food for the winter, right? And so I'm looking for that. Where are they feeding? And I'm targeting that. While I'm walking that stream, has anybody ever, or does anybody not know what a bottom edge set is? Everybody knows what about, you don't know what a bottom edge set is. Perfect. You're an expert now, right? That's what we want. That's all we can ask for. All right, so a bottom edge set is exactly as the name implies. And it's really, we're going to do so again, we're in the same little waterway, and there's a bump out, right? So there's something that changes the natural flow. Is kind of the way I look at it, right? It makes the water happen, or it does something. This could be a wing wall off a bridge. It could be a rock. It could just be a stump. It could be all sorts of different things, right? But what you're looking for when you see something like that is this area right here, does it look different than the other 4 or 5 feet in that stream, right? And generally what you'll see, at least in our rivers, or where I've actually traveled, is you'll see that that's a sandy area. It can be gravelly, where the rest of the area has more of that black muskrat, right? So it's basically cleaned off. Can also have a divot, right? That tells me that something's using that as a travel, right? And so what I do, again, they're in the same system. I'm working the both top and the bottom, is I put in a bottom edge set there. In a bottom edge set, again, as the name implies, is we're going to put the trap right on the very bottom. Right where they clean that off, right? And the way that I'm going to do it, generally I've been working this river now, right? And I know how deep I can, pretty much get the rods in, right? So I will start by getting to that position, right? And what I'll do is I'll come up there with my boot and I'll put, yep, that's a good spot for the bottom edge. And I will start pushing the fiberglass rod. You can see I'm pushing it in on an angle, right? Pretty heavy angle. So I want it to essentially load up, right? So I'm pushing it in at an angle. I'm pushing down, down, down. Let's pretend that's actually happening. And I get to about where there's an obstruction piece. I'll bend the rod back, right? I'll keep pushing the rod down in, and when I let go, it'll spring it, right? It'll spring it forward. And when it springs it forward, it's actually pinching that trap right against that bottom edge, right? That, in my opinion, fully commit, right? So if I use a foot bolt, and this is why I use long chain, usually around a culvert or a drain tile, there could be a lot of riprap or rock or you name it, right? And so if I just got the stop chain, right, which is about that long on the trap, if I want my trap right here, I've only got this big of an area to stake in, right? I extend my chain this much, now I've got a whole lot more area to hopefully get my stake in. I don't want to move where the trap goes, but I'll move where I stake. So that's one of the main reasons I use long chain. Plus for the extra weight, get out the pond, whatever. Again, I want all lines set up the same, so I reach in and grab the boat. But that's one of the reasons I do that. You get big culverts, you can do the same thing. You can top edge. You know, you can top edge right here. You can swing the trap where it's just under the water, just by putting the rod right here. You do it all the time. So that's the open water. When we start getting into the ice, which is generally not long after we open, it starts getting trickier, right? There's a couple of problems that we all have on the ice, and that's where is the run, or where are they coming out of that cut, or where are they going into that pusher, blah 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 blah, right? It's hard, especially if you were like me, you procrastinated, and you didn't go out there as soon as you had that clear ice, right? It was funner to watch the football game or whatever, and well, it rained and snowed tonight, now the ice is all moving white. So that's when it starts getting tough. But what I like to do is obviously the first thing that we're doing under ice is, for the most part, we're hut trapping, right? We're targeting the hut areas. This is something I like to do. There's something wrong with this trap, and I knew that because I put the chain through the jaws. So it must be at one of the last conventions that I was doing a demo. It probably bit me. And so there's something wrong with that. So we won't even try. So anyway, so where do we set around these huts? Ideally, you went out there in that clear ice. Or ideally, it's active enough where there's still open water, right? If there's open water around a hut and there's ice everywhere else, put your trap there. I mean, that's where they're at, right? The biggest thing that comes into question when you're talking about under ice is what trap you use. Yes, sir.
Do you ever use your drone and look at when it's real thin ice?
Yep.
Rather than going out there?
I have, but it's hard. It's really time consuming because on the drone, even though you may have 4K video, all of that sort of stuff, getting it, unless it's a mega bubble trail, you know what I mean, it can be hard to see. But it is a great tool for that as well. And I will tell you, if you ever go to the state of Indiana and use a drone, it is illegal to launch a drone from DNR-owned property. But if you tell them that you launched it from the dirt road, they'll let you go. Something along those lines, right, Jeff? So we can just make sure we're down in Indiana, we're trapping this with weak F&A, we're trapping this pond. I mean, and muskrat huts galore. Muskrat huts galore. But we wanted to know what was on the back side. I'm like, yeah, I brought the drone with me. We fly it up, flying it over, and when you're flying a drone, you got a camera on the front of the drone that you can fly it by sight, right? So you got the screen here, and you're just flying away. I was a little bit rusty, hadn't used the drone in a while, and my knobs, I kind of had backwards in my head, right? And so I was messing with one, the camera was going up, and I'm like, oh shoot, it's the other one. So I hit the other one, and it brought the drone down, but I was still looking straight, and I want to see what's below me, so I moved the camera to point down, and there was 3 kayaks directly below me. I mean, it couldn't have been 30 feet, 40 feet, and these were duck hunters up there that happened to be the second in command for the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. And within a matter of, I would say, if I say 15 minutes, it's probably long, but it wasn't very long. Put the drone, I didn't know who they were, just know they were kayaking. I was like, oh shit, they're duck hunters, they're gonna shoot my drone. And so I got it back into the truck. And we said, well, let's launch where we're gonna launch them. We drove around, I mean, it was maybe a quarter of a mile. Drove a quarter of a mile. We didn't even step out, and the DNR was there. Like, yeah, we just got a call that there's someone out here flying a drone. You wouldn't happen to know who that was, would you? Jeff and Nick, they got it in there. I don't know what he's going to say, and I don't know if I should protect him or turn him in. So they turned their head back. Hey, man, I was flying the drone.
You didn't know what the reward was.
Can you tell me what the reward is first? Yeah. So if there would have been a reward, I'm sure I would have been named. But anyway, you don't want to be in our own country. But anyway, yes, sir, you definitely can use them for that. Again, some people frown upon them, some people don't. It's a tool. We use it as a tool. But anyway, so for the butt tracking, right, in the frozen water, again, we've got to identify where they're at. If you don't know that there's open water, if you don't know where the runs are, and it's milky, you're really left to two things. Can I see a visual representation of a run through the cattails or whatever the vegetation is, right? So can you see where there's clearly a run going through those cattails? Yeah, obviously, you pretend that's going to mimic what under the ice is. And the only other way is really to do the watermelon thump, right? Where you're just out there thumping with a spud or an axe, and you're listening for that hollow boom. And once you have that, hopefully your spud went right through, and if it did, that's where you're set, right? The other question is how close do you set to that butt, right? Again, it's a little bit unknown because that rack on this butt, they may be coming out within this bit of a circumference, but on that other butt, man, they may not be popping out of that run till way over here. You know what I mean? So you gotta kind of know where they're coming in and out of that butt from, right? And once you find that, that's where you set. And when you bust open that water, and ideally, if it's the bonus spot, you'll see some chewings, just like those. You'll see a little vegetation popping through. And if you find that, you know you're in the water, right? That is the spot. But again, just like setting, the only difference we're going to do here is we're not going to use a top edge set, obviously. If you recall back in the day, the old board set, anybody remember the board set? I got stuff walking on my crap. Anybody remember the old board set? You do. We talked about this yesterday. Yep, and I told him, what was it last year, to throw all your wood away, burn it. It's expensive now to heat the house. Use that wood to heat the house. Because what happened is back in the day, and I used to use them too, is you take a 1x3 or even 1x2, whatever, and you take this piece of wood, 6 feet, 8 feet long, you put 2 nails on it, you hang your trap jaw for 1 nail, and then on the other nail you put your carrot, right? And then you run that under the ice. If it's working for you, keep using it, sir. But if you want to stop carrying all that wood and get a little bit more efficient, you can make smaller holes in the ice, and I can carry 7 dozen of these in a jet sled where I can't carry really 7 dozen pieces of wood, right? Would you agree with me? Yes. Well, thank you. So we had this customer that called me up and then sent me pictures. He had said, I can't get my trap to sit level on your hatch bracket. He was mad. And I said, well, I'm sorry, sir, what trap are you using? He was using a bridger. And I said, well, it was made around the bridger. And I said, can you send me a picture? And so he did. And it was just like that, sitting on an angle. I said, son of a gun, you're absolutely right. You can't get your tractor to sit flat. Because you got the bracket upside down. Right? So I tell him, I'm sorry that you didn't understand, but if you just turn that over, you'll get it to sit level. He goes, oh, thank you so much. I can't believe I made that mistake, blah, 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 right? Still talk to the guy today. But what he did for me is he got my wheels turning. And again, if you're old school over there, you got to have that board set. Everybody likes the board set because your tractor's on a 45-degree angle. Well, son of a gun, there's your 45-degree angle, right? So if you want to do that under the ice, you definitely can. For 2 or 3 years, I tried both side by side, whether it was flat or at an angle, 0 difference. Seen absolutely 0 difference in it. You may find something else. If you do, let me know. But I found 0 difference in it. The next question is where does the bait go? I take our bait holder here, and I put it right on the jaw, just so when the trap fires, it doesn't catch the bait, right? And then I'm dropping the trap about 6 to 8 inches under the ice. Yes, sir.
Will that bracket still fall down that rod at a 40 upside down like that?
It'll do the exact same thing that it did before. As long as once that gets 90 degrees to the rod, it will definitely do exactly what you're talking about. Make sense?
Just seems like the weight is offset when it's that way, and it's not going to come down.
Did it work its way down? Doesn't matter because he's under the ice.
He gets ground.
So anyway, so you can do that. So that's the one thing I like to use. And I like to use this. Now, a foothold trap under the ice is probably about 30% of my arsenal. I still use them under the ice because I think there's something nostalgic about catching them in a foothold under the ice. I just really like it. But we like versatility. And when we're talking about versatility, under the ice, I like to use the 160 size body grip. And there's a couple reasons that I like the 160. It's got a bigger kill area than a 110. Okay? Definitely a bigger kill area than a 110. And you gotta understand we're baiting this, right? So we will hit runs, right? But generally under ice, we're just baiting, right? Unless we can find those runs early where the bubbles are and all that stuff. But a bigger kill area, to me, increases my catch percentage, right? A smaller trap, let's say a 110, has killed millions of muskrats under the ice, right? Millions. But how many of those 110s have been tripped without a catch in it, right? So I just see less snap traps without a catch as opposed to what you did in a 110, right? Now, I've talked to people, I've had it happen myself, where I've had 110s tripped, especially on clear ice, where you had your 110 tripped, and there was a dead muskrat floating in it. Did you hit it on the nose and not catch it? You know, it does happen, right? So again, going to a bigger kill zone helps increase the catch, right? The other thing that we like to do when we talk about under ice is we like our triggers on the side versus top and bottom. So when you're using a stabilizer that stabilizes on the end of the spring, you're not restricted to the position your triggers could be, right? And the reason we go on the side, and I would actually like to move this on this RPG real quick to show you. The reason we go on the sides, and again, this is theory as well, right? I've never seen underwater footage of a trap snapping on a rat and seeing probably do it this year for us, if we're lucky. He'll invest in that camera. But what happens is your hinge point, right? Being on the top and bottom brings that jaw around the animal, right? And so when we're thinking about baiting, we're thinking about that having a piece of carrot on it, and the theory being, again, theory, that muskrat's coming up and he's putting his bottom feet on that jaw. If the triggers are up and down, or even upside down, because you don't want the carrot to fall off in your mind, that muskrat puts his feet there. In theory, when that trap fires, his feet go backwards. It makes sense because that's the direction of travel of that jaw. But that's assuming he actually had his feet on, right? Whereas if I have his feet on that jaw now, right, at the hinge point, it's crossing his legs. It's not pushing his legs back. That's one theory why people say that smaller trap, you will have misses, more misses, not all misses, but you'll have more misses than if you go to a larger trap. So, again, as trappers, we try to do everything we can to make a catch. That's been something that I have done that has increased my catch percentage, right? So the next thing of why I love using this trap for muskrats is because of the awesome little mink that we can bonus up on, right? So when we're out there under ice trapping, we're typically on a pond or a lake and we're targeting all of these huts. And when we got these huts and we get that fresh skip of snow, what we end up seeing is that there's a hut over there, we got this hut here, you'll see little mink tracks, and they'll go right through the cattails and they'll go right over to that other hut, right? And then they go from hut to hut to hut to hut, or whatever, right? But they're moving through there. You can see them on the lake. When we're using these rods, it's really freaking cool. But a couple years ago on that pond I dug, I was screwing around trying to make some things happen. And these are some small guys. But we'll have to continue. But on these cattails, they don't freeze, right? All they are is a bunch of reeds wrapped around each other, right? They don't freeze through. So what, and obviously the water's on top of them, their system is below the water fountain, so it's below the ice. So you can take the fiberglass rod, run it right down through the center of that cattail, and now you've got a stabilizer on the ice, right? So what I do, again, I'm not carrying anything additional, but what I do is I find the cattail that's in that run, or beside that run where I found that meat sign, and I simply lower that into position. I'll take cattails, I'll start blending it in. I'll even take little pieces of reed and put it on my triggers. I'll blend it right in, right? But it only takes a couple seconds. I'm not saying be out there forever to make something pretty, like a castle or something. Just get it in there, but take a little bit of time to blend it in. But now, you're out there checking those huts anyways for those rats. This one, you don't even have to open up the ice on, and you've got mink coming through. So again, it's an extra way to pick up some bonus meat. We're all busy these days, right? So why not take an extra second to pick up some extra fur somewhere you're already walking with equipment you're already carrying? Pretty cool. This is pretty cool find. Anyways, that's still the winter time. I don't know how much time we got left. We got 2 minutes. So we're going to go into the springtime real quick. Springtime is exactly like the fall time, except like I said, put bait on it, right? Bait everything. Rats like to climb at that time of year, especially in our. So those top bed sets, they can still be dynamite, still use them on the huts where they're crawling on and off. But put bait. Even if there's a crawl on, put bait. Especially if you targeted those same huts, which, I mean, I wouldn't do it too much, but if you targeted that same hut and only took a couple rats there in the fall and now you're back in the spring, put some bait there. You know what I mean? Put some bait there. Again, they like that fresh bait, that fresh color. You can use synthetic stuff, but when you're using synthetics, make sure that it's okay with that property owner because you can litter up their area a little bit. And before you know it, you don't have permission to come back. But, so just make sure it's okay with them. But that's why I always like to use just carrots and parsnips. A lot of people are using like the pool noodles, you know, the bright pool noodles that you'll get at Walmart or Myers or whatever. Or like I said, duct tape or anything like that. People do use those bright colors. And in the springtime, they do work. Now you can also use floats, right? In the springtime, floats do work a lot better. But put them in areas of some sort of cover, right? Don't just put them out in the middle of the lake. Put them where there's some cover. And then the other, obviously, if you can use colony traps, which we can in Michigan, colony traps are a great thing too, where you got hot runs. I use colony traps, but I only really use them in areas I'm trapping right next to the truck, because they're a pain to carry. You know, obviously you can double and triple stack them, but you can still only carry so many of them. All right, any other questions that haven't been asked already or covered?
You do a top edge baited set
Yes, sir.
with that?
Yes, sir.
Keep the carrot in the water
Yes, sir. Well, so
while touching the water?
two things. So there's some guys up in Canada that showed me how they were doing it, and they were keeping their carrot about an inch above the water because of the waves. So they were just keeping the carrot high enough that waves wouldn't trip the trap. But you got to also remember, in certain areas there's a lot of waterfowl, right? So make sure that your waterfowl has left for the south. It would be my recommendation, you know. But otherwise you might have greenhead. But just saying, it could happen. But yeah, put it an inch or so above the water, and that'll take it. Any other questions?
You have a booth here?
Huh?
You have a booth here?
Yes, sir, we do. And thank you for reminding me again. This demonstration was brought to you by Trapline Coffee Company. Trapline Coffee Company is located in the next two buildings over, about midway through that building on the far side. They're next to J.J. Outdoors, who is the inventor of the Hagerty products. And then we are also across from our good friends Dunlap Lures and Sheet Traps. So if you could swing on over, we'd be happy to pour you a coffee or get you a lure bait, Hagerty